Tanse, good evening. I'm Kristanach Kate. Welcome to APTN National News. Thank you for joining us. A Mohawk community just outside of Montreal has little police presence due to years of tension between community members and both the provincial police and their own former police force. However, a non-police alternative, the Kanesatake Perimeter Security, is trying to provide a bridge between the community and police. APTN's Savannah Craig has the story.
Everybody's equipped with a body cam.
Kane Montour is getting ready to patrol his community of Kanesatake.
That boss.
It's a Mohawk community located just outside of Montreal.
We say it jokingly, people come here and they forget how to drive.
Montour is the coordinator of Kanesatake Perimeter Security.
As soon as they get here, they get into an accident.
He says he's trying to provide a safer community for the members of Kanesatake.
They won't call the SQ, they'll call us.
The KPS offers a non-police alternative for security and support to Mohawks of Kanesatake.
There's definitely an issue here with the SQ, the trust issues, with the RCMP, with, the government.
The lack of trust has intensified in the last few decades, culminating during the 1990 siege of Kanesatake and the burning of the Kanesatake Mohawk police station in 2015 after it was abandoned.
The aftermath of that is we don't have a police force.
But there's still issues being experienced in the community today.
You have stolen vehicles or unwanted people coming here because they think that it's a non-policed community, that anything can go here.
The KPS responds to a variety of issues alongside the provincial Sûreté du Québec officers, paramedics, and the fire department.
There's a bad taste in the mouth from, I guess, going back to 1990 with the SQ and their policing, and there's no in-between. People don't feel comfortable calling them sometimes, so they'll call us as like a mediator, because we can do almost everything except police.
Montour says racism can create a hesitancy for community members to call the provincial police.
I've had family members who are beaten for no reason. Myself, I've been harassed by SQ officers for doing absolutely nothing. Stereotyped, It's hard being an Ungwehue. It's hard being a Native person, when they see your ponytail, when they see you're from Kanesatake. And, racism, it's real, it's here.
Montour says the KPS is doing what it can to support community members and address the illegal dumping of waste in Kanesatake.
What we've been told to do is keep note of it, take down license plates, markings of the dump trucks, the drivers, where they go, where they're dumping.
Steve Douglas is the supervisor for the KPS.
That we're here for the community, and realistically, we are to enforce Mohawk law.
The KPS has limited powers.
But as far as giving out fines, stopping people and physically stopping people, we don't have that capability.
Many First Nations communities across Canada are looking to establish their own police force to replace Canada's provincial or federal police forces in their communities. Could the KPS become Kanesatake's next police force?
I don't know. I can't make that call. But right now, we're here, we're helping, we're doing what we can.
Savannah Craig, APTN National News, Kanesatake Mohawk Territory.
Indigenous Services Canada says it has no timeline to address a backlog of approximately 140,000 requests for Jordan's principal, including approximately 25,000 self-identified urgent cases. Indigenous Services says it is reassigning resources and focusing on service delivery, among other things, to address the backlog. For more on Jordan's principal, plus where things are at with a settlement on child welfare reform, we recently spoke with Cindy Blackstock, the Executive Director of the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society. Cindy, thanks for chatting with us again. There seems to be some legal wranglings around about moving forward with the final settlement agreement and the rejected $47.8 billion settlement. I guess, do you feel we're any closer to seeing an end to the discrimination of First Nations children in the child welfare system?
Well, I think that the negotiation pathway is largely in the hands of Canada. right now. Will they come back to the table? But yes, we will see an end to this discrimination because we have legal proceedings, and if Canada chooses not to negotiate in good faith, we can work with First Nations leadership and craft a solution that works for children and communities and bring it to the tribunal for an order.
In your view, Cindy, what is the best path forward there?
Well, the Chiefs in Assembly have established what's called a Children's Chiefs Commission, which really makes sure, Creason, that all the regional voices are heard, because things are different in the different regions. There are realities for kids and families. And they are going to be spearheading the negotiations once they get underway and making sure that those distinct differences for communities are reflected. We fully support that as the Caring Society. We think that's a great idea. And also importantly, youth are going to be a part of this. And that was part of, thanks to the speaking up of young people at the last assembly.
On a separate but equally important issue, Cindy, Jordan's Principle. First Nations leaders have been speaking out about how it is underfunded, how there is a backlog of tens of thousands of requests. The federal government was supposed to release a detailed plan of how to address that by December 10th. Where do you think those things stand?
Well, that detailed plan was because of a non-compliance order that was brought by the Caring Society and decided by the tribunal on the 21st of November. And you're quite correct, Reason. They were to deliver a detailed plan on how they're addressing it. Well, I've seen the plan. It's going to be posted publicly on fnwitness.ca for anybody else who wants to read it. It has got a lot of platitudes, but not a lot of detail. And I think the tribunal will be looking for that detail. Certainly we will. There are further filing dates in January to hold the government accountable to implementing that order. They have to pay their bills on time so families aren't left out of pocket and nations aren't. They have to deal with the backlog, and the backlog is just a code word for saying that children's requests have gone unanswered by the department. So they have to deal with that as a matter of immediacy. They can't be just kicking it down streams, and they can't be making excuses for themselves. They need to get down to work and make sure children's needs are met.
That's Cindy Blackstock with the First Nations Caring Society. Cindy, thank you for chatting with us today.
Thank you for having me.
A new Senate report is calling on the federal government to establish an Indigenous human rights ombudsperson and tribunal. APTN's Fraser Needham has that story.
The Senate Committee on Indigenous Peoples released its report on Thursday morning in Ottawa. Senator Brian Francis is the chair of the committee. He says Indigenous people need a human rights regime that is more responsive to the needs of Indigenous people.
An Indigenous ombudsperson and human rights tribunal grounded in Indigenous knowledge, practices, and traditions, such as mediation and other forms of dispute resolution, would be better suited to bring justice to people and communities where it has been in short supply.
Senator David Arnott also says the Canadian Human Rights Commission and Tribunal in their current forms make it difficult for Indigenous people to pursue their rights due to high legal costs.
As a result, many would-be litigants can find themselves unable to make a complaint unless they have considerable means or can find counsel willing to do so for pro bono work.
In the past, organizations like the Assembly of First Nations have said Indigenous rights must be primarily defended by their elected governments and not by bodies like the Tribunal. But Senator Michelle Odette says there needs to be a balance where grassroots people can have their voices heard.
If we had a national inquiry, it's because grassroots people stood up and supported many chiefs in Canada. So the balance is very important, that we have also a space, safe space, where the people have a say in those structure.
First Nations Child and Family Caring Society Executive Director Cindy Blackstock says she supports the report and its recommendations, but that an Indigenous ombudsperson and tribunal must have at least the powers of the CHRT and probably more.
You need to have real teeth in those orders to be able to force change. Because even when governments make statements that they want things like Jordan's Principle to be implemented, which was a Truth and Reconciliation Commission's top call to action, sometimes that doesn't actually manifest on the ground. And despite, you're wanting to feel like when they know there's a problem, they'll fix it, That doesn't always happen.
APTN News reached out to Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Gary Anasandagri for comment. In an emailed response, his office says it welcomes the report and will be reviewing accordingly. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
An update now on the story about Grand Chief Jerry Daniels of the Southern Chiefs organization in Manitoba. Multiple sources told APTN News Daniels was involved in a fight with two council members from Lake St. Martin outside an Ottawa bar the night before the Assembly of First Nations gathering on December 2nd. Ottawa police confirmed they responded to a disturbance call in the Byward Market and one person was taken to hospital. A new statement issued by the SCO on December 12th does not mention the Ottawa incident but confirms Daniels is on leave for, quote, an undetermined length of time for health reasons. The statement says Chief Cornell McLean of Lake Manitoba First Nation will act as Grand Chief. The SCO represents 33 Anishinaabe and Dakota First Nations. We have been covering a number of stories about how Indigenous people have been treated in the healthcare system. Dennis Ward is up next with the Truth in Politics panel to weigh in on 3 extreme cases. We're back in about 3 minutes. Welcome back. This week on Truth in Politics, it's an issue that never goes away. Several weeks ago, we told you the story of Jason Kennedy, who came to Winnipeg from the Bloodvein First Nation for a leg amputation. Staff at the Grace Hospital cut off the wrong leg, And we also have had 2 recent stories about elderly hospital patients in Saskatoon and now in Edmonton who had their hair cut by staff without family consent. Our Dennis Ward spoke with Winnipeg Free Press columnist Negon Sinclair and Jennifer Leywitz with Pasqua Strategies about these issues. Here's that interview.
Jennifer Negon, thanks for being here with us as always. Jennifer, we'll start with you. Why do you think we keep hearing stories like this coming out of hospitals?
I think there's a couple of things that are coming into play here, and I don't want to speculate with what entirely happened behind the scenes within that hospital. But I will say that it seems that there is a really big component of discrimination that exists. A lack of cultural understanding is another big one. I think that there's a lot of people out there that don't understand or can appreciate the significance of various different components of First Nations identity and culture, including hair. And I think just, again, it just goes back to that lack of understanding or not even wanting to understand. And that's the place where the discrimination comes in, viewing our people as less than and, not appreciating what makes us who we are. And I think there was a lot of pieces missing into how this could have happened.
Negon, can you talk about the significance of hair for many Indigenous peoples?
Well, we spend a few hours talking about all the different that there's just 640 different communities in Canada and of course 80 different cultural groups. So I mean to encompass it all would be impossible, but I'll just say a few things. So identity is a big part of it. Usually identity is referring to the way in which a familial way that a traditional family dresses their hair, ties their hair. There's a strength, usually shows long hair for men is indicative of a lot of strength, but for a lot of women, it shows a lot of wisdom. But generally, there's a very spiritual significance with hair. For instance, we don't throw our hair away. We burn our hair because it is a sacred part of us, and it's often likened alongside medicine. And so we share that hair with creation when we get it cut. Probably the most significant part is that our bodies are intended to work with creation. Almost every single Indigenous nation culture is trying to create a bigger connection with nature, with the natural world, with all of the universe. And so when we grow our hair, we are resembling creation, particularly that sweetgrass. And that's why we tie that sweetgrass in the same way that we often braid our hair, whether it be as an elder or a knowledge keeper. And that's usually where our hair comes from, our deep connection with the earth, and that's what it's indicative of. So it's something that is very sacred, and when you cut it, like in residential schools or in this case, what you're doing is you're literally cutting us off from our very foundation of who we are, which is our connection with the land.
Jennifer, Dexter Adams of the Pasqua First Nation not only had his braids cut, but his eagle feather and bear grease tossed in a wastebasket at the Royal Alexandra Hospital in Edmonton. Should there be some sort of trainings on the cultural importance of these types of items?
I think training is incredibly important. I know that there's been a lot of questions raised around how this could have happened and if maybe it was rooted in a lack of understanding. But at the same time, I just genuinely cannot wrap my head around how anybody could think that this is acceptable. And I read one news article that the braids and the eagle feather and the medicine were thrown on top of soiled diapers. And to me, how much more clear does it get that there's not only a lack of understanding, but a lack of empathy and appreciation for our people? And all I can think about right now is that family and the community, Pasqua First Nation, on how this makes them feel. Because when you reach the end of life, that's some of the final moments of your life before you are carried on to the spirit world. And I think of my own grandma before she had passed away and how some of my family members took such good care of her in those last moments. And I physically cannot wrap my brain around how anybody would think this is acceptable. And now to hear that the family is still waiting for follow-up, how is this not treated like a major, major incident? Because it is. And yeah, training is the bare minimum, but we also need to start understanding that systemic racism and discrimination exists in all of our areas, including healthcare. And we need better care, and we need our people on the front lines of some of these services so that maybe this can be prevented from happening in the future.
Neon, the hospitals, the healthcare system, they express remorse and vow to stop these things with better training for staff and whatnot. I remember back to the release of the Brian Sinclair report, and I asked, how many people lost their jobs over this? And they said, well, nobody did. Like, is there more that can be done here?
Yeah. The fact that there isn't any retribution, any consequence to kind of this disrespect is just preposterous. But what I would say is that, there needs to be protocols in place, and there needs to be things written by Indigenous peoples working with institutions. People have to put resources, time, effort, hire appropriately to be able to deal with engagements, respectful engagements with Indigenous peoples. I just traveled recently with my sacred items, a pipe and my feathers and medicines. And I know there's been some recent controversy with airline staff, particularly from a certain air company involving the national chief and their headdress a short while ago. Mm-hmm. But I can tell you that when I went through security in an airport, they uncovered my pipe, they uncovered my my medicines and the feather. What immediately happened is they pulled off to the side. They changed their gloves. They asked if they would be able to touch those items. If I had said no, they wouldn't have touched those items. I was dealt with by a supervisor. They were very respectful, and I also felt very seen. I felt appreciated, and they didn't do anything inappropriate with my items. They kept asking. And then, in fact, at the end, the supervisor asked me and said, what is it? Is there a better way that I could do this? And so there's lots of different ways that this can be handled institutionally. And the idea that you would simply just take someone's items and toss them into a refuse bin or a garbage bin, somebody has to be held to account for that. I mean, that's just basic human decency. Never mind the fact that there should be protocols for this.
Of course, we're going to continue the conversation on this and the AFN on the Truth in Politics podcast, but we'll leave it there. Thanks to you both.
Jody Wilson-Raybould is back for part 2 of talking about her new book. That interview when we come back. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Here we see the setting sun spilling what little light it has left as it disappears behind the Seven Sister Mountain Range in the Gitxsan Nation. Thank you to Clarence Jones for thinking of us and sending that photo in. If you have a photo you want to see here, send it to share@aptn.ca for the chance to be our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the east, St. John's -1, Charlottetown -4. Cartwright -3, Happy Valley, Goose Bay -4. Saguenay -8, Quebec City -7. Sarnia -6 and sun, Sault Ste. Marie -5. Big Trout Lake -15 and rain, Sioux Lookout -18. -16 in Churchill, Thompson -18. Princess Harbor -15, Gimli -17. -9 in Regina, Saskatoon -7. Uranium City -8, Buffalo Narrows -10. Flurries in High Level at -11, Peace River -10. 3 in Calgary, Red Deer -3. 2 in Kamloops, Bella Coola 3. And now here's part 2 of Tina House's sit-down interview with former Attorney General of Canada and now best-selling author Jody Wilson-Raybould.
Any future for you in politics once again?
Well, I'm really happy with the place that I'm in. I think this is the place that I'm supposed to be, and continuing to spread my learnings and my understandings and my ideas to advancing our people and Indigenous people in this country. But never say never. I know people say that all the time, but I do believe in callings. And for me, I do potentially see a pathway back into politics, but I'll have to wait for that sign.
Now, going back to that word pathway forward, what is your idea in terms of a way forward for Indigenous people to advance their rights in this country with the political level that we're at now?
Yeah, I mean, we're in a very, challenging time in the country, globally. I mean, for me, I talked a bit about being elected in 2009 as the regional chief here in British Columbia. For me, and it always has been this, the key to advancing Indigenous issues in this country is to change the approach, which has been the approach by every successive federal government and other governments, which it has been the denial of Indigenous people's rights. We need to turn that page to change from the denial of rights to the recognition of rights. And the key to transforming Indigenous communities and nations in this country is by exercising our inherent right to self-determination, which includes self-government. This is one of the major things that brought me to Ottawa, and it's one of the major pieces that still needs to be done that I'll continue to advocate for, which is a mechanism to enable our communities, First Nations, to move out from under the Indian Act to be self-determining and self-governing.
Amazing. Just so incredibly proud of all of your accomplishments, and thank you so much for being such a powerful leader for all of our Indigenous nation here in Canada.
Thank you, Tina, and thank you for what you and what APTN does in telling the stories, the really important stories of our communities.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Back to you in studio.
Thank you, Tina. And that's your evening newscast for this Thursday, December 12th. We're back again tomorrow for your daytime newscast. Make sure to join us then. From all of us here, from our staff from across the country, hi miigwech masicho kwana. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again. Ekse.